Everyone could take their seats, please.
Oh, I didn't.
The chair will call to order the meeting of the Board of Education tonight, April 10th, 2012. Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mr. Charleston? Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here. We could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
He's our new junior high principal. I'd like to introduce him and welcome him to our District 201 family.
Thank you very much.
And if you could maybe say a few words about yourself and our meetings are televised.
Oh, fantastic. I hope my brother-in-law's watching.
Yeah, well, and if you don't watch it live, you can always catch it again on the replay. Anyway, if you could introduce yourself to the community.
Okay, my name is John Chodak, and I'm very excited to be the new principal over at Westmont Junior High School. And I just can't say enough. I think that the community is set up for success, and I hear that there's just phenomenal teachers. I'm looking forward to working with the faculty and Ms. Quattrone and the school board and the rest of the administrative team. And just very, very excited. I just recently left the district. I moved out of the district. But it's been a fantastic place for us, and I'm excited to be there. So thank you very much.
And then we would like to formally introduce Ms. Kristen Kressel, who's been acting as the principal at Manning, and now she will continue that role as the permanent principal at Manning. And welcome. And for those that don't know you, would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. It will be my fourth year in the district, and I was at the junior high for 2 years as the assistant principal, and came over to Manning last year as interim. It's been wonderful getting to know the staff of 2 buildings, and I look forward to everything along the way. Thank you.
Are there any public comments? Okay, then we will move to the consent agenda. Are there any comments or questions?
Marie, I just had a
Yes,
quick
go ahead.
question. I sent Kevin a quick email this afternoon. On the board calendar, I was wondering if there was any reason or conflict to maybe move the December meeting a week earlier, just to get it away from Christmas a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I got your email too. If anyone can take a look at that, I know I did work with Kevin, and we kind of looked at this upcoming year's calendar, trying to make sure that there wasn't any, not that we don't love each other, but Valentine's Day meetings or anything. Also, not putting a meeting in Thanksgiving week and everything.
Right.
So there was no magic for picking that, just that it was not during the break. But if anybody wanted to go a week earlier.
I think it's on the 18th right now, and I
says
thought
the 18th.
maybe the 11th, just to get it away from Christmas a little bit.
Fine with me.
Problem with that?
The only, Kim and I talked briefly. The only thing is, with it being the second week of December, the bills that need to be paid, we probably only would have a handful. And so we would probably need some authority then to pay the remaining bills for the month.
Yeah, and there might be work. Last year, we approved the workman compensation renewal at that meeting. And then there also, you probably wouldn't have your financials at that earlier meeting as well.
The
You'd have
5-year.
So you'd have to
January.
have, yeah, you'd have to have your November financials and December financials in January then. You'd have 2 months in January, because we might be able to get it done. It just depends on how quickly we are able to close out the month.
Does this put a hardship on the administration? Okay,
I don't
that's a
think
loaded question.
Yeah, I don't have a hardship. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
The only, you know, again, if the, and there's a way to do this for the board to give authority to the administration. You know, that takes, I think, some of that time issue away. And the only other possibility, and then we could always do a special board meeting if this is the case, which I know we don't like to hear that necessarily. But obviously, that would be the board meeting, we'd approve the levy. And so, you know, assuming that we get our numbers in a timely fashion, we're able to put that together so that in November, we could present the tentative levy so that we have the correct number of days for it to be posted and available for review, then we'd be fine. If there were to be a delay with us receiving our numbers from the assessor's office, then there's a possibility then we wouldn't be ready for that first November meeting, and then possibly have to have a special board meeting a little bit later in December to approve the levy. But that would probably be the only agenda item then.
Is there any problem with, you know, making the decision later? I mean, just kind of leaving that date as a, you know, we might change it based on, I mean, because for me, it doesn't matter really, as far as I know my schedule right now.
And, you know, I think the only thing is, I know the schools are kind of waiting, I think, a little bit to see where these dates fall, so that we try to avoid as many conflicts with, you know, school events versus board meetings. And so there's a possibility that if we needed to move it, that we'd run into a conflict with a school event.
When spring break, Christmas break starts, or winter break starts the Friday after this, right?
Right, it would be at the end of that week, so the 22nd.
At the end of that week, the 22nd.
Right.
You said that with the financials would have to be postponed until January. Does that make that January meeting excessively long, you know, heavy with information?
no, I mean, the financials, I mean, sometimes there's a lot to talk about, sometimes there isn't that much. So no, I don't think that would make it significantly longer. I mean, just a few extra minutes.
So my question is, if we're thinking about doing a special meeting, would that special meeting be on the 18th?
Sometime between the 11th and 18th,
Yeah.
you know, because there's a 28-day window, so you would have
Yeah.
to back into it that way.
Well, if you're,
So,
I guess if you're saying if we would have a meeting on the 18th,
Yeah, it
Would
doesn't
you-
accomplish anything.
would they, yeah, okay.
ultimately.
right, if you end up there
Okay,
anyways.
does that answer your, I mean? what do you
Yeah, I mean,
think?
it was just if it works out for the calendar,
Right.
I thought it would be nicer to be a little farther away from the day, but.
Sure.
You know, if there's too many things resting on that date, then obviously.
Okay. No, I mean, that's a good point, and I kind of worked, or trying to avoid all of,
Yep.
any of those breaks and everything, so, okay, is there anything else, so, are you comfortable
fine.
with that? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Are there any other questions about the consent agenda? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number one, personnel recommendations, part of that being naming Miss Amy Quattrone as the junior high vice principal and Miss Denise Matthews as the high school vice principal. 2, approval of school maintenance project grant. 3, approval of ombudsman contract. And 4, approval of board meeting calendar.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Is Ms. Quattrone here? Congratulations. And thank you. And while we have your attention, if I could just, state, at the Community Awards dinner last week, Ms. Quattrone was named Educator of the Year by the Chamber of Westmont with glowing recommendations. And it was a wonderful event, so congratulations for that, Educator of the Year. Okay, then the next item, action item. Did you want to talk about?
Do you want to mention anything about the?
Sure. We, Kevin and I interviewed 5 out of the 6 audit firms that responded to our request for a proposal for auditing fees, and our recommendation is that we approve Miller Cooper and Company as our auditors. And Kevin and I, between the 6 firms, between the two of us, we've worked with 4 of those 6 firms. We had a lot of good response. There was a lot of firms to respond to our RFP, and so I'm looking forward to working with them.
I assume this is one that you've worked with?
Yes, I have worked with them before.
And we expect they'll be timely in meeting
Yes.
commitments that
Yes,
they say they're going to get us.
that was stressed in our proposal. It was stressed in the interviews that we had with the firms.
How long have we had our current auditing firm?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's been at least probably 6 years.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
All right. Any comments or, okay. Then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the audit firm of Miller Cooper and Company Limited to provide audit services for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2012, 2013, and 2014 as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, motion approved. The next item is the approval of asbestos abatement bid.
Well, just after reviewing the bids that were presented, the recommendation is to award the bid to Colfax Corporation in the amount of $71,450, which is about what was projected. There really, because of the timing, there really aren't a lot of opportunities for savings there because every school wants to get their work done at the same time.
It says that there was a consulting fee. Is that included in that 71?
No.
That's in
the
addition to.
consulting
That's over and
fees
above.
in
Right.
addition to that.
And these two are being brought to us ahead of all the rest because these were the 2 pieces that Steve Cashman was able to get in the paper early.
Right,
Right.
and that, yeah, because we had to get the abatement contractors lined up so that we could make sure our projects, that they could fit us in the schedule and get those done, because nothing else can move forward until that piece is done. And then the windows, with the lead time, you're looking at 12 to probably 14-week lead time to manufacture the windows.
Okay.
So that's why we did that.
So the dollar amount plus the consulting services, that's the amount that's close to what
Yes.
the estimate was?
Yep.
Okay, are there any questions on that? Then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the asbestos abatement contract with Colfax Corporation in the amount of $71,450 as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, the next action item is then approval of the window bids, and the same thing, we got this in early and.
Right, we got this in early because of, the goal is to have all of our projects complete by August 13th, and so we wanted to get this out to bid early. And after reviewing the bids, the recommendation is to award the contract to Auburn Corporation in the amount of $89,250. And here there was an opportunity for savings. And so actually this is approximately $51,000 less than what was estimated for the project, so.
I just wanted to mention that it was nice to see on the board document what the delta was. So as we go forward with these, it's good to,
Yep.
I mean, it's a lot to shuffle through to try and find that one line item from the original scope.
Right.
So I don't, if no one else objects, it's nice to see that as each one come through, just tag it back to what that original number looked like. So that was good to see that on here.
And if I see this there, the window contractor are the same people that did the junior high
Correct.
windows, so that's great too. All right.
The cost of the windows installed, but not the masonry work, is that correct, or is that the total bid? No.
Correct. Yeah, that's
Correct.
not the
It's
masonry.
work.
That will come in the next round of bids
Okay.
for you to approve.
Sure, that's what I thought, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the window contract with Auburn Corporation in the amount of $89,250 as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, then the next item, information discussion, is 2012-2013 staffing needs.
And this is obviously the first time the board is seeing this, and again, I apologize because we were literally working all the way through this afternoon, Kim and I, along with Steve Carr, on some of the high school information. And so this is kind of where we're at, and then based upon feedback from the board tells us if we need to go back, sharpen pencils a little bit more, or what you'd like to see. But just to kind of summarize it very quickly for you, South Elementary, the First Start and Early Childhood program would be moving from Manning to South. And right now, it's 1.5 teachers, basically, 1.5 FTE. But rather than having one teacher there all day and another teacher there just half a day, the recommendation is that we increase that. And so that we actually add another section of the First Start program, and we'll be able to service more students that way. As far as the what are considered specials, the art, music, and ELL services, we believe we can accommodate that with our current staff, and so we don't foresee additional FTE in that regard. And so if you compare next year's program to this year's program, it's an increase of 0.5 or half a teacher. When we look at Manning Elementary.
Before you
Yes.
leave there, I just want to ask though, but you did say that we would be servicing more students?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, Kevin, that's another 10 students, is that
20.
20.
20 for another
students, okay.
section?
First Start has 20.
Okay, great. Thank
Is
you.
it, I know maybe you just didn't list it, is PE going to be provided by the teacher?
Right now, that's what occurs is it's the students have activities, physical activities during the day, but that's provided through the teaching staff.
So that would also accompany
Yes,
that? Okay.
yes. And then for Manning Elementary, we have a retirement in 5th grade, so we would hire a 5th grade teacher. We also have a reading specialist retirement. Right now, we have 3 full-time teaching staff with reading. And in consultation with the elementary building for next year, because of looking at the needs of the students, we can reduce that by half a teacher, so 2.5 reading specialists. We employ 3 teaching assistants, so we'd be looking to release 3 teaching assistants. And right now, in conversations with the elementary, they like the model that we've had, and so their recommendation is to hire a certified teacher that will work with the 4th and 5th grade, and again, having those smaller groups for reading and math. And then also what has worked really well is response to intervention, is it provides a way to provide those interventions, which they're currently lacking. And then overall, there's a decrease of half a teacher, which helps to offset the increase at South. Miller Elementary, they have a retirement again, 5th grade, and so we'd be looking to reemploy. And then reduce special education assistants. Last year, as a cost savings, we reduced the number of special ed teachers, and that hasn't worked very well this year. And the teacher currently is working an overload to meet the needs of students with IEPs. So the recommendation is that we hire a special education teacher, because looking again at the minutes that those IEPs will require. And then that increase in FTE, it's not quite an even trade-off with the teacher assistants, but it's close with that reduction. The junior high, we have retirement in social studies, so there's an opportunity there to reduce that position to 0.5. At the same time, we were able to artificially increase social work services this year, and so this would allow us to maintain that 1.0 in social work services. Vocal music, we have a retirement, and when I get to the high school portion, because of what's happening with music at the high school, we're going to be replacing the teacher at the junior high, but not at a full-time position. That's because we have a senior teacher that we need to maintain their full-time employment. And then the other piece as well is we did not have the literacy coach position. It was budgeted for this year. It was not filled. And so we'd be looking to hire that position for next year, and that would be split between the high school and junior high. And so overall, the junior high is looking at a decrease in FTE of 0.2, 0.2 of a teacher. At the high school, we have a science teacher retirement, which would employ the science teacher. And this is where music and the high school is driven by course selection by students. And so because of the course selections in the elective areas, there's actually 2 fewer sections of music. And so that's where that teacher then picks up the 2 sections from the junior high. They need to increase their science FTE by 0.4, decrease the math by 0.2, decrease social science by 0.3, increase special education by 0.3, and again that 0.5 literacy coach. But overall for the high school, the decrease is 0.1. So you're basically looking at next year an increase in FTE of 1.7. So if you recall, we were talking 2 teachers, one at Manning and one at Miller, and then the reduction in FTE is what brings it down to 1.7. But again, and also at Manning, the reduction of teacher assistants, and then at Miller, in terms of FTE, it's an increase, but in terms of our budget projections, those types of things, right now would be basically a wash, you know, so in terms of that. But that's kind of where we're at, but again, based upon input from the board, then we can go back to the table and see what else we might be able to do.
I'm missing something in the math.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah.
I'm looking at the increase, the decrease, the balance, the decrease, the decrease. I don't know how we get to 1.7. Kevin, I'm sorry.
That's right. Well, the 0.5 for the First Start program at South,
Right.
that's a wash with the decrease in reading specialists at Manning of 0.5. So that's
Okay.
a wash. Then at Manning, you're hiring a teacher to work with 4th and 5th grade. And then at Miller, you're hiring a special education teacher, so you're up 2
Right, okay,
full-time
got it.
teachers. Then junior high, you're down 0.2, and then at the high school, you're down 0.1.
Thank
So
you.
that's how we get to the 1.7.
Let me just ask, in terms of junior high and high school, mostly the high school with all these things. So what is done every year, I think I know this, is that driven by the course selection by the students is how you're able to know what is going on at the high school in terms of what you need.
Right.
Right? So it's driven by the need in that
Right,
building?
correct.
Okay.
And one kind of, just so you know, kind of a shift in philosophy. In the past with the district, when those minor adjustments would occur, we would just sometimes be a little creative with teaching positions and not necessarily reduce teaching loads, but rather maintain those full-time positions. And just, again, because of the economics and trying to maintain our overall FTE, you know, next year you may see fluctuations a little bit different, so then we'll have to manipulate teaching staff a little bit. But, you know, now we're basing on year-to-year course selection and enrollment. That's what determines how it's staffed.
And specifically then about like the junior high, so we know the vocal music teacher. So for next year at the junior high, is that also driven by the requirements, the course selection by the students at the junior high?
Right, in the elective areas, and it's a little bit, their schedule is different than the high school, so it's a little bit trickier. But right, that's, there's still the need for a full-time teacher at the junior high, but because of the lack of need, I guess, at the high school, that's what changes that position a little bit.
So we are hiring a new person, but
Right.
it's somebody from the high school? Is what you're, I
What
mean-
will end up happening is that the teacher who's currently in that position, part of her day would be a high school teacher would fulfill, and then a new person in the district would then fill out the rest of the day.
So the new vocal music teacher isn't a full-time position?
Correct. It'd be .8.
0.8.
Can I ask, with regard to Manning, the reading specialist retirement, and we're going from a full-time to a .5, and it's based on the needs of the students. What does that mean?
You take a look at the students who are recommended for reading services and the number of minutes that are required, and based upon that, you can determine how many reading specialists you need.
Okay.
And so again, that could be something that, fluctuates from year to year based upon the population.
I have to say, I'm a little bit concerned right out of the gates. When we're going from 3 teaching assistants to 1 elementary teacher, and that teacher will work with the 4th and 5th grade reading and math and provides RTI interventions, and we're looking at 156 students in 4th and 5th grade next year, that seems like a substantial load for one teacher. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on
I
that.
have that exact same concern. I was thinking the same thing, because right now, we have those 3 teacher assistants, which are helping technically 9 sections, and we're going to go to 1 full-time teacher that's going to help 6 sections. I don't see the balance there. I would be very concerned about that.
Sure.
I am too. A couple of things in terms of that, because one of the things that we did was free up some space at Manning. So so we take these 3 teacher assistants and then they're gone, but we just bring in 1 teacher. That just the numbers alone it doesn't seem like we've done a lot
Right.
to reduce the numbers, the issues.
And
of the
we've added on
numbers.
by putting on the RTI interventions. Were those
Right.
teachers doing that this year? Or were they just doing the classroom assistants?
The classroom assistants have been working with the interventions.
They were with the okay, but we're still going from 3 to 1. I mean, we're 9 sections to 6 sections and 3 teachers to 1 teacher. I'm not sure that balance seems right to me.
And one of the things, again, attempting to do, but again, based upon your feedback, we can go back and, like I said, sharpen our pencils and see what we can do to make different scenarios work. But, the overall is trying to keep us level as best we can. And the other thing that may occur, and this isn't until, we really take a look at it, but as you add sections of grades, then that increases the demands for those special areas. And so, we already have added to that demand with South, and so now we add a section at 4th and a section at 5th grade. Possibly we could be looking at then either teaching overloads for art, music, PE, or additional personnel, depending upon how that all shakes out.
Kevin, is there any possibility that there's, can be movement from one grade school to another or back and forth for part of a day or a whole day for staff?
That's something we can.
I'm thinking, you basically, it looks like you're having a split class at Manning, but the focus is reading and math and RTI. And if you did the same type of scenario at Miller with a split, like grade level class, you have 4 teachers for 4 sections, and if you had 3 teachers for 4 sections with like a 4th grade, kind of a split 4th, 5th, and then a 5th grade, you would free up a teacher. So, I mean, that's just looking at it from an outside perspective, but I don't know. And then is it possible for a teacher from Miller to go over to Manning, or even for part of a day or something like that, to kind of keep the net increase in FTEs down?
That's something, Joe, I can, bring back to our elementary principals and talk about them with them and see what that model would look like. That's something we can take a look at.
I guess we would want to know why that's good for Miller also. I mean.
Right.
Why, if we're talking about shifting
Sure.
teachers from one school to another.
As we get new kids in, are we continuing to put them into the building that has fewer students?
All year, that's what we've been doing. If we've had new families to the district, then they would attend Miller.
Because even that second grade class over at Miller right now is kind of light at Miller's side, but it's heavier at, not a lot big number, but it's a little heavier at at Manning. So I just was curious if we were keeping that intact.
And that's something that my guess is we would keep in place, that type of policy. It seems to have worked out well,
Well, I have a question. When we're talking about the junior high and the high school, we're being very creative, it looks like, with our keeping our teachers paired up with enrollment course options that the students are taking. But when I look at the numbers, what this says here is that next year at one elementary building, we're going to have 12 students we have 24 total students. Now, of course, the numbers change on a day-to-day basis. So if we kept things as they were, next year at Miller, there would be 2 classes of 12 each, which is 24 students. And yet next year's at Manning, if you take the current kindergartners, you'd have 3 classes of 22. So I guess, and looking at the numbers as we're at now, the next year's 4th grade will have 25 each. Next year's 5th grade would have 26 each, where next year at Miller, you'd have 15, 15, 15, and 12 in each of the classrooms. So I guess one of the concerns that I would ask is, again, following up on something what Joel was saying, if one of the things that when we talked with the facility committee about equity across the district, is there some creative ways we can have staff creatively work to even out these numbers? Because if these numbers here are already taking parents who have volunteered to move move to a different school, and with new enrollments, even that one 1st grade next year with 12 each, I mean, that's, unless there's a way we could have 12 each or 15 in all the buildings, but to do that, we would be hiring.
Right.
If we're going with one building as a standard, let's say 15 kids in each class, well, if we tried to do that at Manning, then we would be bringing in more teachers. So I guess the balance is to look at what do we want to try to have as a balance and equitable distribution.
Sure.
With not only with the junior high and high school teachers, but with the elementary school teachers, to make sure that all the needs of the students are being met. Because it just looks like there's a burden right there on this one person that we're going to bring in for the elementary.
And, we did take a look at the current kindergarten at Miller and then moving into 1st grade. And the one thing that Kelly had mentioned is historically, we pick up students between kindergarten and 1st grade. And so, again, it's the groups of students have, specific needs. And so her concern was that number could get to that 28, 29, 30. And that's part of the problem with some of those other grade levels at Miller. You're at 30. If you combine them, you're at 30. And that's always historically been a number we've tried to stay away from. And then the last thing that I'll mention is when you look at one of the benefits of having the enrollment that we do at Manning is that there are more individuals providing reading services and also gifted education. That actually helps with the 4th and 5th grade because there are students who are working with Karen Walsh for reading and math. That reduces that class size. Then we have an additional teacher. One of the things that Kelly was pushing for was additional gifted support because when you look at minutes kids get with that teacher, it's less at Miller, but at the same time the trade-off is, but you have smaller class sizes, so differentiation, those types of things, that occurs more easily, and that when you have smaller student-teacher ratios. But, I mean, definitely, again, we can take a look at that, at some of those things and see what that may or may not do.
So what is our target class size as a district?
Historically, it's when, class sizes get to be 29, 30 is when they're split. And then there isn't, this past year, because of looking at grades 3, 4, and 5, we did add the teacher assistants. But there is no set policy, as to, or we don't really, I don't think, have a philosophy either as far as what we target as our class sizes.
Because I think as we make decisions about how we're staffing the buildings, some thought or guidelines in that area is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at if you just bump the classes forward this year to next year, next year's 5th grade at Miller has 20, next year's 5th grade at Manning has 26. We're closer. The disparity this year was much greater at the beginning of the year, so we're certainly, by moving some kids and some late enrollments and that kind of thing, I think we're getting closer to having the appropriate class sizes. But I would be very concerned about focusing on one building versus looking at elementary education and figuring out the staffing that's most appropriate to serve all of our elementary students. And, not so many teachers at this building and so many at that building, but we have X number of elementary students and, they have certain needs that may differ or may be similar. And, I would just say from my perspective, I would really want you and your team to look at all the needs of the elementary students and give us a staffing plan that is appropriate to those needs, however they differ.
Could I also suggest, I know last year when we offered for parents to move to Miller, it was so late in the season, a lot of parents were already committed, they knew the lists to some degree. Is it possible to put that out there as an offering again this year? If somebody sees those knows that the numbers are coming in and they're not comfortable with it, that option is open.
Soon enough for people to make rational decisions about how they're handling their school days and their transportation and all that type of thing.
I have a quick question about the transportation of those students, the ones that live in the Manning boundaries that have elected to go to Miller. Are we paying for a bus service to take those students? Mm-hmm. So we could be increasing our transportation costs by having even more students go to Miller over Manning.
No, it won't increase over this year because it's a route, so
It's its own route.
Yeah, so it won't increase over what we've incurred this year because that's a separate route this year.
When you were talking about, let me go back to the 4th and 5th grade. So next year, what you're talking about is still having Mrs. Walsh do the 4th and 5th grade reading, but you're, according to what you have here, bringing in one additional elementary teacher.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And would also be working with reading so that those groups can be even smaller,
Well, I guess I have to piggyback on something Shannon said too, where if you think generally, like in the junior high and the high school, their whole day is constantly moving, and so any given class they could have a number of students. But when you're talking about like some of these like 1st and 2nd grade classrooms or 3rd even, those children are in that class for the majority of that day. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would reiterate to say what is in the best interest of the students if you've got a 1st grade teacher who's got 22 kids day in and day out, as opposed to someone who might have 12
Sure.
or 15. I mean, I would think that that would be a burden on a staff member over another staff. And I guess I know from in the past, one of the things that I know when we were first on the board, there was a situation where, and the reason I know this is because it happened to be my son's class, that class hit 30. But the board couldn't do anything because there was no place.
Sure,
There was no
sure.
physical place to put those students. So at that time, the board discussed and talked about that every year it would be, we'd look at the numbers every year. And so, that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to look at the numbers now, just to see where we are for next year and what we could do creatively to absolutely, number one, meet the needs of the students, but to do so in the most cost-efficient way.
Sure.
I mean, I know years back, we had a couple of years of split classes, where you had, first and second grade combined or second, third grade combined. I have no idea if that is something that, I mean, I know my own child benefited from that. I don't know what the benefits are of that. I would never profess to say I would know anything. I know that other districts do that. Is there some way of looking into that to do something for keeping in mind what the needs of the students are, whether there's IEPs or special needs, but just, and I think one of the goals for what we've been doing is to do something about these class sizes. And
Sure. Maria, I think I'd just add to that is that, the 4th and 5th graders that are at Manning now have been in large classes since they came to Manning. And so they've never experienced a class size of 15 kids. It's always been upper 20s. And so, I think in some ways we owe them a little bit of relief or an opportunity to have a different classroom experience, if at all possible, if there's a creative way to do it, and if there's a way to do it that, we're not adding a lot of staff in these budgetary times. I also go back a little bit, Kevin, in all the strategic planning and facilities committees and things that we've talked about, and going back to that, how we want to start exploring delivering services in a different manner. And, I know I've said it before, but that skit that you showed, where the kids are on the conveyor belt and they just get grouped together and they just get farmed through our educational system. And is that really, age, the best way to group kids together, or is it better to have those benchmarks that they meet and then, progress through the system? And in some ways, a split class setting, split grade levels, class settings, gives you that opportunity to evaluate, would this be a model we would want to expand in our district? Is it a better way to deliver education to our students, or are there big problems with it? And so I think, if we look at this a little more creatively, a little more as a challenge and an opportunity, we might be able to get some data and feedback from staff, from parents, and student performance to answer some of those questions. Because otherwise, if we don't do some of that stuff and evaluate it in-house, we're never really going to know.
Sure.
So that was one thought. The other thing is, I really want to make sure that next year, since we don't know the final numbers, that we have some flexibility next year should you have all of a sudden, a large bubble appear that we didn't anticipate based on what we're looking at here. So is there flexibility in staffing to move staff around in the fall should the need arise? So, I think
Sure.
if you put together a plan now, are we locked into this absolute, and the only thing we can do to alleviate a bubble that might show up in the fall would be hire another teacher? So I'd like whatever you come up with, if possible, to be as flexible as it can, so we can, adjust based on the fall needs.
that brings up a good point. Do you set, I don't know how this works, do you set at the end of this year next year's assignments, or is there some way to?
Typically, you notify staff of their assignments before the end of the year. So,
Can it come with any kind of caveat that it looks this way, but?
that's something we'd have to talk to the WTA about. to see. But does this sound like a reasonable way to proceed? There's some positions I think that you have here that, if we can move forward and post replacing some retirements and those types of things. And then as far as the enrollment piece and looking at Miller and Manning, again, let's go back and take a look at just a couple different, different scenarios and the, strengths and weaknesses to those, and ultimately what that cost potentially is to the district, and bring that information back to the board to take a look at. And, I'll say that we'll have it for the 24th. I'll be optimistic.
I just want to say one thing real quick, and I understand it's a sticky wicket when we're talking, we're in a deficit, and obviously we don't want to get deeper and deeper in debt, but I don't want one teacher's salary standing in the way of the best education for the kids. I mean, if when push comes to shove, if we have to have one more teacher to accommodate the numbers, we have to do that. It, again, costs money to educate kids, and we can't just not do it because we're in a deficit. We have a bubble. We have, I have one of those kids who has spent her entire elementary experience in classrooms of 29 and 28 kids. So, I just want to go on record. I get it. I don't want to be in a deficit, but I also, I don't want a teacher's salary standing in the way of that.
Sure.
I don't want to sound callous, but my oldest son spent his entire career in a class of 29, and he was at Manning. But it was a different environment then, and the Miller wasn't the different number like it is now. So it's not necessarily the number that I'm finding uncomfortable. It's the fact that another building has less number. So I really want it to be about education, not about this number. That number happened in our district repeatedly up until maybe 5 years ago. There was an aide in the room generally, but my son, who graduated and is now in Illinois, was in a class of 29 his entire career at Manning.
When you talk about numbers, though, if our job here with the teachers and administrators and the board is to provide the best that we can for all of the students, why would you, I have a child, same thing, big classes her whole time. Why would you continue that pattern when perhaps one of the issues that we could do is look at things creatively and allow there to be smaller classes? I mean, I imagine every educator would take a smaller class, over a larger class. It's not that it can't be done. I don't think anyone is saying, and we've got fabulous teachers in our district, but I think one of our jobs is to do that balance between the economics, and you're right, our widget, so to speak, are our children, and we have to pay whatever that, we have to find a way to do that. I have a concern that if we're doing a lot of wonderful things at the junior high and the high school between, you might be a full-time teacher, but you might be splitting your time between, two. But I have a real concern when you have classrooms historically with 12, 13, 14, 15 kids, and then we're saying to this other teacher over here, you will continue to teach 25, 26 kids over and over and over again. And I question that it would be great if every class could have 13 kids in it, but then we'd be bringing in a lot of teachers. But
And then,
I'm concerned about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It may be a non-issue to you, but September was not that long ago, and our community was in here,
I know, but I just, part of me
in
feels...
droves about the class sizes. It's a big issue for them.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them. And I understand that when you look at a class of 15, it feels like you're being squished at 29. I get that. But it's not, I don't see it as big a long-term problem, seeing as how my son still got into Champaign, Illinois. I mean, I think the teaching, the staff, the principals, the administration, it's their job to ensure or look at it, make sure that what we're looking at is all about education for all students and not to shortchange anybody. And the fact that more people live at Manning's area, and we tried to make some boundary changes and we tried to do some of that to even it out, and the community didn't want to do that either. So it kind of put us in this corner where we got this disparity. But it's not about, in a way, we're in the corner because the public didn't want to change the boundary, because the public didn't want to do grade level centers or attendance centers. So that would have evened out the numbers too. And we didn't want to do that.
Kevin, it is nice to see the numbers at Manning come down a little. I mean, the average now for 5th grade is 23. That's a big accomplishment from where we started this year, and I hope that those students are, benefiting from some of that relief, and also the aides too. So on top of improving class sizes over the course of this school year, they've helped. So I hope that has made a positive impact for those students this year, all 3 grade levels this year.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm walking around this neighborhood. There's a lot of strollers out there. And so I imagine we're going to see a lot of those kids. I know on Halloween there were a lot of little kids coming to the door. So I guess I would like to see just us, because obviously, you brought up a good point. 5 years ago, there was also something very different in our district. And at Manning, there were only 2 classrooms, 2 sections of each classroom. So then when South went over to Manning,
Well, it's not always true. There were classrooms.
I know, but you know what I mean. You referenced 5 years ago. So there wasn't, So I guess the question is, what can we do? I mean, I think we've done something with the buildings. Right. Mm-hmm. So now, some way, somehow, if we can find some way to make there some equitable. I mean, I know just this year in 4th grade at Manning, like a whole bunch of kids just happened to move. So that affected those numbers, but they started with like 29 kids in each class. So it's a
Sure.
And obviously, there's talk about just draw a line down the middle of something and change something. Well, that's a very, 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 very hard conversation to have. So, there's nothing that's easy. None of this is easy.
And we incur additional cost.
Incurring additional cost. Right. So I guess that's what I would ask for when we now talk about staffing, because we've dealt with the building issue. So that's just what I'm saying.
Well, and as I said, the board members have made some suggestions for us to take a look at, and we can take a look, again at it and bring back a few proposals to the board to consider.
Do you want to look over, like the ones you were talking about? Like some of these are, like, do you want to go through these and see because some of them are.
Right, and I guess, what I think is separate from that conversation, I think, again, the increasing the first start to 0.5, hiring a 5th grade teacher for Manning.
Right.
I would recommend hiring an elementary teacher at Manning. Maybe we'll determine a little bit later how to best utilize that person, but I think to get that posted and get that process going. And then with Miller Elementary, the special education teacher, I think that's a necessity. And if we want to hire that Miller Elementary teacher, again, with anticipation, we'll utilize the person in the district, in some capacity, or whether or not they'll be assigned to Miller. I think, again, the junior high and the high school, I think those are pretty self-explanatory. I mean, in terms of retirements and so forth.
Yeah, that sounds.
So if we can get those things posted and then,
that sounds
start that process.
Doable.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay.
And I just, the one thing that we need to mention again is that early childhood grant. I don't know if that helps to subsidize the position, the halftime position at all. or,
Not the building grant.
not the building
No,
grant.
the actual-
The grant that we were awarded earlier in the year.
Funded at a higher level.
Yeah, right now, the preliminary estimate that we've received, we're gonna receive the same amount of money that we did last year, which was about $118,000. And we're very fortunate that we were awarded that competitive grant last year, because if we weren't, you only are getting the grant for FY13 if you were fortunate enough to get the grant for FY12. So we are very lucky that we got the grant and in the significant increase that we did get for this year. Yes, it offsets it. I can offset salary, but then that just means there's other things that we were using that money for that we won't be using it for. So it's, you know, it's which pocket do you want to take the money out of? You're still taking out more money.
These
Right,
So
right, but we
you're
brought,
still
but new money
incurring-
did come in this year.
Right,
School
but
year.
that's all been spoken
Sure.
for and covered more of the salaries than it had in the past.
But we didn't bring in anybody new with that money when we were
No.
awarded it. We just
No,
spread it around where it was needed.
right, but by increasing that 0.5 in, you know, for a teacher, you also increase the teaching assistant by a 0.5 as well. Because, so you've got an extra half-time teacher and an extra half-time teacher assistant that you've now incurred additional salary for.
And I go back to I'm sorry, Joel, were you done?
Well, I just, the money came for early childhood. I'm glad to see that we're able to, increase our programming in part because we got that money. Whether, it gets shifted around in this budget line or that budget line, I think it does play a role, and I'm glad to hear that you're anticipating getting it again.
These 20 extra students, though, were these students that we were paying to go elsewhere, or are these just brand
No,
new?
they're not.
They were students on a waiting.
Yeah.
They were on a waiting
Typically would
list.
be on a waiting list.
Okay.
They qualify for the program, but because we didn't have seats for them.
Okay, so
So
we're,
they're not being served with any other funding from us.
okay. So if we never made a change to any of the early childhood, just next year, we just could not accept these 20 students, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Anything else? Okay. Superintendent's report?
With the superintendent's report, strategic planning, Thursday, 6:30 at Manning Elementary. The strategic planning committee will meet for I won't say final time, but it'll be a few months before we'll need to meet again. And it's basically to take a look at the strategic plan in its entirety, and then also, in light of comments from the board, take a look at it as well. And then after that, it'll be brought to the board for its second reading and then approval from the board. So that'll take place this Thursday. Facility planning, we met with Steve Cashman to kind of tighten up the timeline. And basically, this is what it's going to look like for us. The bulk of the projects are the pre-qualifying for the bidding will be April 24th. The bids will be received May 1st, and then at our May 8th board meeting, the board will review those bids and then award those bids. June 4th, we're done with school June 1st. June 4th, work will begin at the high school. June 5th, it sounds like we'll be making the move to south from Manning, the administrators. June 7th, asbestos abatement will begin for Manning Miller. June 15th will be the actual work, construction will start, renovations will start at Miller. June 18th, renovations will begin at Manning. August 13th, all the work will be completed except for the administrative area at South. That completion date is October. And so that's what that timeline looks like going forward. So we're confident and we're ready.
Thank you for that. I've had a number of people, particularly at the high school, keep asking, and mostly students, are we really getting windows and are they going to be in by next year? So August 13th, huh?
Yeah. And then just a couple other things very quickly. May 3rd is a scheduled board self-evaluation. And If you haven't received it yet, you will be receiving, or you should have received, an email from the Illinois School Board Association with a survey that if that can be completed by April 16th, that'll give Barb Tony opportunity to process the information and bring those results back for that, and that'll kind of kick off that self-evaluation. So April 16th, if you could have that completed. And then the last thing I have is...
Can I just interrupt a minute?
Yep.
Judy did forward that, and I
Okay.
did see that, and I went to it for a minute, and it says like that you should plan on about maybe 45 minutes. Right. To look at that.
All
So
right.
I did look, and the link worked. So we're all, so for board members.
And then the last thing is, at this Friday, the 13th, there's a couple events happening. But the one that I'm going to mention right now is, it's the second annual Miller Science Fair, April 13th. Currently, I have, including myself, 3 judges. If there is a board member that would like to join me on Friday, April 13th, just let me know, and I can give you the information if you'd like to be a judge for the science fair.
Is it during the day?
Yes, it's during the day.
I'd love to. I did it last year. That was
It was a lot of fun.
a lot.
Certainly was.
Yeah, I would love it.
So the more the merrier. The
Yeah.
judging gets done quicker then.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love it.
Okay. So,
Well, I can join also. I'm off
Right.
on Friday, so I will be there.
and Marie?
Okay, what's the next item?
I think that was a yes from
All right.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, all right. All right. And that's my report.
Okay, then, public comments. Are there any other public comments? No? Okay, any board reports of any?
I just want to say I attended the junior high awards breakfast last week, and it was very exciting. I think 132 kids came up for awards, so it was very exciting, and the numbers were astounding. So congratulations again to all those students.
Kevin, there's a couple of other really big events Friday night too, aren't there? So I think it's Twilight Stars at Manning is Friday night,
Right.
and the St. Baldrick's event at the junior high is also Friday night. And I mean, all 3 of those are equally huge events in each of those respective buildings. So I want to make sure everyone's aware so they get to their appropriate building at the right time that night. or that
Not to put you on
afternoon.
the spot, Amy, but do you know how much has been raised so far for St. Paul?
We were $10 away from our $10,000 yes, goal as of 3:15 today.
Can I give you a $10 bill?
Jonak will throw in the-
Oh, Mr.
Jonak will
Jonak's
throw in
going to
the
give you the 10?
$10.
All right, great. I would add one thing. Last week, I was fortunate enough to help out with Reading Week, with Manning's Reading Week, and it was such a blast to have. We had community members from the Park District, the Police Department, the Fire Department, the Board of Ed, the library, the Chamber. It was a great event. So I just want to say thank you to the many volunteers who came in to read for Reading Week, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So looking forward to that again next year too. Okay, anything else? Okay.
Maria, we also just going to mention that at the Westmont Chamber event, we also had a member of our family that was was awarded Citizen of the Year for 2011. So a parent in our schools, a high school parent, John Chorney, was awarded Citizen of the Year by the Westmont Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau. So in addition to Amy Quattrone's accomplishment as Educator of the Year, we were very fortunate in both of those categories that a member of the CUSD 201 family won both of those awards against fairly stiff competition in both categories. So we had doubly thankful for the accomplishments of everybody in our extended family.
We should also probably mention as well that Rainey Kaplan, high school foreign language teacher, was nominated for Educator of the Year as well. So we're very proud of Rainey's accomplishment.
Mr. Carey, would you know what Mr. Winston's honor was?
Rotary.
He's also,
What was it?
Oh, yeah.
Hugh
Paul
Winston?
Harris Award from the Rotary.
he's also District 201 parent.
Right, yes, Mr. Winston, yeah, that was,
It was a good clean sweep for us that night.
yeah.
Our 201 did really well.
Okay, there are no public comments then. Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining and personnel issues.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Ms. Caparelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
And there will not be a vote after closed session, so thank you all for coming.